back to my channel. It's time for another card kit video, and this is featuring the February card kit from the Stamps of Life. But before I open this box, I just want to show you what the stamp and the dies for the month are from the Stamps of Life. This is the Sloths to Stamp, and it has 2 sloths, some branches, some leaves, and then some sentiments. Hang in there, let's hang out, don't worry, be happy, wishing you a chill birthday, I like you a sloth. And then it has the dies that match. So if you are in the stamp club, you're gonna get your stamps. If you're in the Die Hard club, you're gonna get your stamps and your dies. But if you're in the gold club, you'll get your stamps, dies, as well as your card kit. And some of you might just be in the card kit club. And I wanna show you, go ahead and do an unboxing of the card kit with you today. And then we're gonna make some cards. So let me go ahead and open this up. And we have, every month you get a paper pad, and the paper pad always corresponds back to your stamp and dies. So this theme of the paper pad is going to be sloths, and this is the Best Wishes collection. So we're just going to quickly go through here. We have some Don't Worry, Be Happy, and then we have some leaves and some ginger snap. We also have our sloths that you can use your shadow dies to cut these out, and this makes for a super quick card. So if you don't like to color, or if you just don't have time to color, you can use your shadow dies and cut these cute little sloths out, as well as these leaves and these branches, again, to make for a super quick card. And then we have some more patterns, and these are just little baby sloths. I just really love this pattern. This is super cute. And then we have some leaves, and look at these leaves. These leaves actually have some polka dots on them. They're patterned and they're really pretty, very unique. And then we have some more patterns, some triangles here, some leaves and some flowers, some more sloths. Here's a different kind of leaf. Some more flowers and leaves, and some more leaves. And then you can see that these leaves are in all the different colors of the palette this month. Then we have some green stripes, and then it goes back to the beginning. So you're gonna get 2 sheets of each one of those papers, and that is your paper pad. You also get these really cute puffy stickers, and these puffy stickers match those leaves that were in the paper pad, as well as these flowers. Those match the flowers that were in this paper pad. So you can see how the leaves match up and the flowers match up. And these are super pretty, so they have dimension. They're puffy stickers. And then we also have a stamp set. Have a splendid day, enjoy the moment, you warm my heart. We also have 2 dies. We have a Best Wishes die. This comes with the words and the shadow layer. We also have a December swirl, so it has a swirl with the shadow layer. And we also have these really cute balloons. These are felt balloons, and they come in 3 different colors, again matching the paper pad for the month. And it looks like it's the ocean, the green apple, and the cantaloupe. And these are felt, so you just need to put some glue on the back to adhere them. And these are super cute. I could just totally see right now making a card, having the sloths hanging down, holding these balloons. I think that would be really, really cute. And then you have your heart stickers. These are just some heart stickers, again, matching the same color scheme. You get 2 ribbon. You get a kiwi, looks like a kiwi gingham, and then a ginger snap solid. And you also get your idea card with some inspiration as to what you can do with this card kit. And then we also get our storage envelope that you can hold everything in, and then our solid color cardstock. And it does come with envelopes. And the cardstock colors for this month, it looks like we have cantaloupe, bubblegum, ocean, kiwi, spearmint, and then we have tangerine, ginger snap, chocolate, and then you get your 4 sheets of powdered sugar. So that is our color scheme. So I think that's a really pretty color scheme. And you know what? You can make, I know a lot of people want to know, like, some masculine cards. Like, we need some ideas for masculine cards, and I think that this would be a good color palette to make some masculine cards. And I just want to point out that all of the colors in this card kit are also featured at the bottom of your paper pad. So it lists all the colors here. So if you ever need to make a card down the road, and let's say you run out of this card stock, if you have any other if you have any cardstock in your stash, you can go through and look and see what colors match this paper pad. And that's for all the Stamps of Life paper pads. So we're gonna go ahead and make some cards. I don't know at this point how many cards I'm going to make. We'll see. I never know how many I'm gonna make, so we will see. I am going to start out by taking my paper pad, and I always like to start my card kit videos this way by finding our sheet that has the die cuts that we can actually die cut. And I'm gonna start by die cutting these sloths. So I'm going to take my dies for this month, and I am going to, well, let me go ahead and tear this out. So we're going to tear out that, and there's always two sheets, so I'm going to go ahead and find the other sheet, and I'm going to tear that out as well. And then I just want to point out, these cannot be die cut, but if you wanted to cut these out and use these on cards, you can do that. You can also, if you had like a circle punch and you wanted to use a circle punch to circle punch these out and use these on cards, that's a great idea. You can do that as well, because that will eliminate some coloring and save you on some time there too. So that is another option. Also, if you're just looking at these, even the leaves, you can fussy cut those out. There's no die to match these, but you can totally fussy cut these out and use these on a card. Okay, so here's our two sheets. So we're just gonna, obviously we can only do one at a time. So I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that when you're using these dies to die cut, that you're using your washi tape, because the worst thing that can happen is that you don't put washi tape on here to hold these dies in place, and you run this through your die cut machine and the die moves and you cut in the middle of the sloth. Then it's wasted. Make sure you're using your washi. So which one is this? This one is this one. So it looks like there's two of each. So you actually get 2, 4, 6, 8 sloths. And if you only used one sloth per card, then you can have 8 cards right there. But if some of you might want to use 2 sloths per card. It's really up to you how you want to use your paper pad. So we can also die cut these branches. This one does not die cut out. This is if you just wanted to use your cardstock and die cut another branch just another branch. So this one here is going to die cut all of these. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, so now we're going to do some leaves. Let's see if we can just do both of these at the same time. I don't know if we can. No, we're not going to be able to. All right, so I'm gonna run these through my die cut machine, and I'm gonna go ahead and do all of them, and then I'll come back and we'll make some cards. All right, so I went ahead and die cut all of my sloths and the leaves and the branches, and now I'm ready to start making some cards. For this card, I'm going to be using the Tree Fold It die, which was just released this month from the Stamps of Life. And I'm using a powdered sugar card base, and my card is going to fold kind of like at the top left-hand corner. The cardstock is not large enough to fold from the top. If you wanted your card to fold from the top, you can purchase the larger cardstock that the Stamps of Life sells. But I didn't have any, so I'm just using a standard 8.5 by 11 sheet of powdered sugar cardstock that came in the kit. And make sure when you fold your paper in half that you're using the largest shadow die to put right over that fold. That way it doesn't cut directly through the cardstock and cut out a tree. You want it actually to have a little piece there so that it can open there at the top left. So I am just taking my pattern paper, and I am going to be using the chocolate for the tree bark, and you can see the leaf pattern paper that I used for the top of the tree. And I'm just using the smaller tree die. I'm die cutting just the pieces of the pattern paper and solid colored cardstock to go over top of that. Here I'm ink blending some of the edges of the tree bushes, and I'm just ink blending those with some green apple ink. And there is a separate die in that set which will cut out those 3 bushes. So I did cut 3 additional
to put on the top of the tree. And also I did do a video using this tree fold it, and I made 2 cards. So if you haven't seen it and you do want some detailed instructions on how to do this tree fold it, you can go back and watch that video. I will link it down below in the description box so that you can quickly refer to that. So here I'm just using glue to add my pattern paper, and I'm going to use those extra tree bushes, and I am going to add some foam adhesive, and I'm going to add those to the top of the tree. I think by adding the foam adhesive it just adds some nice dimension. And I'm also going to use the puffy stickers, the flowers that came in the kit, and I'm going to add 3 to the top of the tree. I just think it adds a little bit of nice color. And I'm going to use my Lazy Sloth, the one that's sleeping, and notice that I'm adding glue directly to the branch. I'm not putting glue on the back of the sloth, I just put it on the top of the branch. That way, once I put my sloth on there, I know it's going to adhere in all the right spots to that glue. And then I just use my shadow die to cut out a sloth, and I'm just adhering that to the back, so when you open the tree it just has a nice clean uniform look. Because right now that sloth, it had some pattern paper that showed on the back, so I just used some of the powdered sugar and just cut that out and adhered that to the back. And here I'm using my grass die. This came in the borders set, and I'm die cutting this out of the kiwi. This is actually some pattern paper, as you can see there on the back. And I just die cut some of the grass, and I'm just going to add some grass behind the tree. And here I'm just measuring with my ruler because I'm going to cut this down. I don't want the grass to be so thick. So I'm just going to trim this down with my trimmer. And then as far as the width of the grass, I want to cut it down so that it's not wider than 5 inches. This tree folded card, it actually measures as a 5x7 card. It's a much larger card. So I am trimming it down. Mine's actually about 4.5 inches. I don't want it more than 5 because I want it to be able to fit in an envelope that is 5x7 in size. So trimming that down, and I'm also going to use the green apple ink and just ink up the top of the grass. I'm also going to just take my ink blender tool, and notice that I'm just dabbing on the ink just to add some texture there to the top of that grass. And then I'm going to open up my card, and that grass is going to go behind the tree. That way you can see the entire tree bark in front. And I'm just adding glue to the bottom, right below where my thumb is, and adding the tree to the grass. And then I'm going to take a sentiment that came with the Sloths to Stamp set, and it's the Hang in There sentiment, and I inked that up with some chocolate ink, and I'm adding another puffy flower, and some of the leaves that I die cut from the paper pad are going to be added there as well. And that completes this card. For this next card, I'm actually going to be using a cloud die, but I'm not going to use it as a cloud. I'm actually going to be using it as it's going to look like trees. And I'm cutting it out twice, once with a solid kiwi and once with the pattern kiwi. And you'll see what I'm going to do with that in just a minute. But for now, I'm using a piece of Bristol smooth cardstock because I like to use that when I do ink blending on the background. And I'm using the Sky ink, and I'm just putting some ink down on that Bristol smooth cardstock. So I'm just ink blending, and it's just the one color ink, and then I sprayed it with water and then lifted that water up with a paper towel, and it just added a nice texture to that ink blended background. So now I'm just measuring about 2 inches up. I'm adding glue, and I am adding my tree, which again is my cloud background, but it's really my tree. And then I'm just going to trim off the excess. And by the way, that blended piece of cardstock was 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So here I'm just trimming down the pattern paper, and I am going to add that pattern kiwi piece right above the solid kiwi piece. And here I'm just measuring where I want to put my adhesive. I don't want to go put the adhesive anywhere past that line that I just marked. And I am adding the double-sided foam for the adhesive because I want it to add some dimension for my tree. And I'm going to peel that up and add it to the top of the card layer. And after I add that to the top of the card layer, I will just trim off the excess on both the left and right edges of that card layer. And here I'm just going to die cut some grass using the grass die. Now both of these dies, the cloud and the grass, are in the borders die set, and I will link those on my blog. So I did die cut a piece of the grass. I'll use that at the bottom, but before I add the grass, I want to go ahead and add my sloths. And for this card, I'm using 2 sloths, and I'm just marking where I want these to go. I'll erase the pencil marks later, but I'm just marking them so that I know when I add the glue where I need to put the branches. So adding those, notice that part of that branch is off the side. That'll be cut off in a little bit. So adding 2 like they're hanging out of the tree, those 2 branches, and then adding glue to the back of the sloths and applying them to the card layer. And here's where I trim off that excess. And then I'm going to add the grass, but right now I'm measuring where I want it to go because I do need to add a sentiment. And the sentiment I'm using is going to be from the Sloths to Stamp set. And I am going to be using the chocolate ink. And then I'm just going to add some glue to the bottom of that grass. Now if I would have done this over again, I probably would have put some ink on the edges of the grass as well as on the edges of the tree, but I was just trying to get through this card and I forgot to do that. So I'm adding that to the bottom, and then all of this is going to go on a A2 size card base, and the card base is in the powdered sugar. So I'm just going to glue that entire layer on to the card base. And then I'm going to use my leaf dies from the Sloths to Stamp die set, and I'm going to die cut some of that green pattern paper. I didn't want to use the leaf dies that I cut out of the pattern paper pad because I just thought they were just thicker than I wanted, so I didn't want the white edges showing, so I just die cut my own and then added them to the bottom with the grass and added some of the puffy flower stickers that came in the kit. So I'm just gluing everything down here, and this is going to complete this card. I think this turned out really, really cute. For this next card, I am using 2 circle dies. One is a stitch circle and one is just a solid circle, and I cut out using the cantaloupe and the powdered sugar cardstock and just layered those on top. I also die cut the Best Wishes die that was in the kit. I'm not using the shadow layer. I did put some double-sided adhesive on the back of the cantaloupe cardstock before I ran it through my die cut machine. And notice that as I'm adhering it, the eye in the wishes is not there. So when you're using this die, you have to make sure you go back and get that eye, because it will either be stuck in the die or stuck in the paper that you removed from the die. I'm also using the scroll dies that were in the kit, and I cut 2 of those out of the powdered sugar cardstock. I did add the double-sided adhesive to the back before I ran it through my die cut machine, and all of this is being layered on a piece of pattern paper that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. You can see that some of the scrolls ended up off the layer, so I just trimmed off the excess and then just gluing down the circle right to the center of this card layer. And I do add some of the puffy stickers on the card layer. And then all of this is going to go onto a top fold A2 size card. And to get the top fold card, I just took a powdered sugar piece of cardstock and cut it down to 4 1/4 on the 8.5 inch side, and then I scored it at 5.5, and that gave me the top fold card. And then I just added some foam to that layer and added it to my card base. For this next card, I'm using a Spearmint A2 size card base, and that green leaf paper measures 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm using the stitched oval dies. I'm using the largest and the second largest in the set. The largest is cut with the spearmint, and the second largest is cut with the powdered sugar. And here I'm just attaching the pre-cut sloth and the branch from the pattern paper pad, and I did glue the branch directly down onto the oval, and the sloth I did add some foam just so that he's popping up, and I am using some of those really pretty puffy leaf stickers that were in the kit. And then I am going to adhere that powdered sugar layer right onto the spearmint oval. And here I'm just going to use one of the sentiments from the card kit and using spearmint ink to ink that up. It's the Have a Splendid Day, and then I'm just going to trim that down using my paper cutter. And then I'm going to layer that onto some spearmint cardstock. So I'm just going to trim the cardstock using my scissors just so that it fits around that sentiment, and then glue the sentiment to the spearmint strip. And then I'm going to add that to my card layer. So the Have a Splendid Day is going to go at the bottom, and then right above that is going to be the oval with the sloth, and then that entire card layer is going to go onto my card base in the spearmint. So I'm going to glue that down, and that will complete this card. For this next card, I'm using an A2 size powdered sugar card base. The cantaloupe cardstock measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and the ocean leaf pattern paper is 4 by 5 1/4. I'm also using the cloud dies that came in the January Stamps of Life card kit, and I went ahead and cut the shadow layer out of the powdered sugar and the top layer also out of the powdered sugar, and I did apply the double-sided adhesive before I ran that through my die cut machine. And for the clouds, you're going to have 2 of those clouds. You'll need to cut the shadow layer and the top layer out twice. And here I'm just ink blending the edges using the cloud ink just to give them a little bit of dimension there. And here I'm just positioning everything where I want it on the card. I am going to be using the 2 felt balloons that came in the kit. I'm going to put a cloud at the top and a cloud at the bottom, and here you can see that I am attaching them. I do leave them hanging off the edge of the card layer, so I just trim off the excess. And then I'm going to add the sloth and the branch in the middle. Here I'm just positioning everything because I am going to add a sentiment to the front, so I need to know where my sentiment's going to be. So I'm going to use my Missy to stamp that out. And that is the Hang In There, and that's from the Sloths to stamp set. And I was using the chocolate ink to stamp that out. So here I'm going to go ahead and attach my branch where I want it to go, just applying some glue. And then I'm going to attach my sloth. And with the sloth, I am going to apply the double-sided foam adhesive to the back. And then I'm going to take my 2 balloons, and I am using some small glue dots just to adhere some twine. So I'm just using some white twine that was in my stash, just putting a few of the glue dots on the back of the balloon to attach the twine, and then I trim the twine down, and I'm going to apply those balloons to the top of the card layer. In one of the balloons I did put glue, and one I put double-sided adhesive, and then I ended up coming back later on and applying double-sided adhesive to both of the balloons because the glue was not adhering very well. So here I'm just tucking under the twine underneath the sloth so that you can't see the ends. So it looks like he's holding on to the balloons. And notice that here my balloons, I don't like the way the strings are looking. One is kind of slanted and one's going straight, so I kind of just lifted everything up and kind of fixed the twine so that both are kind of at an angle. It looks a little bit better that way. And here I'm attaching that entire layer to a cantaloupe piece of cardstock that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and then attaching that entire layer to an A2 size powdered sugar card base. For this next card, I'm using a top folding A2 size card base in ginger snap. I'm also using a spearmint card layer that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. The sloth pattern paper measures 4 by 5 1/4. And the spearmint strip measures 1 3/4 by 4. And then the green leaf pattern paper measures 1 5/8 by 4. So the spearmint strip is layered underneath the leaf pattern paper, and only a little bit of the spearmint paper is showing above and below that leaf pattern paper, and I just trimmed off the excess there when I added it to that sloth card layer. And I did cut out a circle using a circle die, some powdered sugar cardstock for that stamp that you saw me stamp out, and the stamp was from the Sloths to stamp set using the spearmint ink. So here I'm just attaching the sloth from the pre-cut images with the branch, and I'm also using couple of the leaves that were in the puffy stickers that came with the kit. I did ink blend the edges of the Let's Hang Out sentiment, that circle, with some ginger snap ink, and I added that with some foam to the bottom. Notice I also put some hearts there from the stickers that came in the kit, and I'm attaching the entire layer onto the the ginger snap card base. And then I just attach some ginger snap ribbon to the top, and I just tie it in a knot and trim off the ends, and that will complete this card. For this next card, I'm using the A2 size swirl card base, and I'm only using 3 dies from this set. The largest die will cut out the A2 size card base, and then these 2 dies that I'm pulling away from the paper are the dies that I'm going to use for my swirl. So you actually have to use both of these dies together, so the swirl is actually going to go inside that large rectangle when you're die cutting it on a sheet of or a piece of cardstock. You want to make sure that those 2 pieces are always together, just like you see here. Otherwise, if you don't have that large rectangle, it's just going to cut the swirl out of into the cardstock and not out of the cardstock. So you always want to make sure that it is attached. It's also a good idea to add some washi tape to attach both of those pieces together before you run it through the die cut machine, as well as making sure that you add double-sided adhesive to the back of that cardstock before running it through the die cut machine. When that comes out of the die cut machine, you will just need to weed out all the pieces that you don't need. And then I'm going to take a piece of cantaloupe cardstock. I did cut it out of the large rectangle die that came with the swirl set, and then I'm just adhering the swirl on top of that cantaloupe cardstock. And I'm going to use the Best Wishes die. I die cut it out of some kiwi cardstock and the shadow layer out of the powdered sugar. I did put double-sided adhesive on the back of the Best Wishes before I die cut it, so it's easier to adhere to the shadow layer. Don't forget that dot for the eye that was stuck in that paper that I had to weed everything out. And then I'm using the swirls that came in the set, and I did the shadow layer out of the powdered sugar and then the top layer out of the cantaloupe. And again, I did put the double-sided adhesive on the back before running that through the die cut machine. Next, I'm taking that entire swirl layer and I'm adding some of the kiwi gingham ribbon to it right down the center, and just adhering it to the back of that card layer with some double-sided adhesive, just making sure that it is centered on that card. And then I'm going to add the Best Wishes die cut as well as some of the swirls. Now with the swirls, I'm just positioning them where I want them to go. I am going to use the kiwi balloons, and I think it would look really nice if I added those swirls as the strings to both of those balloons. So with the balloon on the left, the swirl that you see there, I am going to just glue it flat to the card layer. The one on the right, I'm actually going to add some foam adhesive to the back just to give it some dimension so that it kind of looks like it's sitting in front of the other balloon. So I have to cut my foam adhesive down to size because I don't have any that thin, but I am putting the foam adhesive all the way down the bottom of that swirl where you see the thinner part of that of the swirl. And I do add double-sided adhesive to the back of the balloons, not foam, just regular double-sided adhesive tape. because I feel like there's already some dimension there when the balloon is added to the swirl and then on top of the swirl card base, so on and so forth. So just some tape and add those to the top, and I think that looks really pretty. And then that is just going to be layered onto the Kiwi card base. It's the A2 size card base, and I'm just going to glue that entire layer down, and that will complete this card. For this card, I'm using an ocean card base that measures A2 in size. The pink leaves pattern paper measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. The ocean cardstock measures 3 1/2 by 4 1/4. The flowers pattern paper measures 2 3/8 by 4, and then a powdered sugar strip is 3/4 inches by 4 inches. So I'm stamping out the sentiment from the stamp set that came with the card kit in some candy ink, and I'm using my Misty. And then I'm going to start putting this card together, and I am going to adhere the pattern paper on top of the large ocean piece of cardstock, and the sentiment is going to go at the bottom of that ocean piece of cardstock underneath the flower print. And then that entire layer is going to have some twine wrapped around just a few times, and then I'm going to tie it in a knot. And then I'm going to take one of the puffy flower stickers that came in the kit, and I'm going to attach it on top of the twine, covering up where the knot is. I do put some foam adhesive on the back just to adhere that down, and I am also putting some foam adhesive on the back of that entire panel, and that is going to be adhered onto my next card layer. And then that entire card layer will then go on the top of the A2 size ocean card base. And that completes this card. For this card, I'm using the Die Grid 2 die set, and I am just die cutting several colors of the leaf pattern paper since I had these scraps. So I am just adhering them with washi tape to this 4-panel grid, and then I'm going to run that through my die cut machine. And then I'm going to take that grid and run it through the die cut machine with the chocolate cardstock. And then I'm going to take the large rectangle die that came in that set and die cut that out of the cantaloupe. And then I'm going to apply liquid glue to the back of that chocolate grid and apply that directly to my cantaloupe layer. And then I'm going to fill in all of those squares with the different pattern papers that I die cut out of the leaf patterns. And I really like this die set because if you ever have scraps, this is a really good die set to use just to use up your scrap pieces. Now when I ran the chocolate cardstock through the die cut machine to get that grid, it ended up giving me 4 chocolate squares, which I'm going to use 1, and then I cut a piece of cantaloupe cardstock down to layer on top for my sentiment. And here I'm using one of the sentiments that came in the kit, and since I wanted to put it all on this small rectangle, I went ahead and cut my sentiment stamp in order for it to fit on that strip of cantaloupe cardstock. So I'm going to use some chocolate ink to ink up the stamp and press that down, and that cantaloupe piece of cardstock is measured 1 1/2 by 2 1/8, in case you were wondering. And then I'm just going to layer that on top of that rectangular chocolate layer and add that right to the middle of my card. And then I am going to apply liquid glue to the back of that card layer and add it to my chocolate A2 size card base, and then just add some gingham ribbon to the side, use some hot glue, and attach it. And that completes this card. For this card, I'm going to be doing some more ink blending, and I'm taking a piece of the Bristol Smooth cardstock and I cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4. And I also took my cloud die and I die cut it out of just a regular piece of cardstock, and I'm using it as a stencil here. So I'm using my sky ink and I'm just blending some sky ink onto that background. And notice that I am just putting some ink down, and then I'm moving the stencil a little bit down that cardstock, and then putting some more ink down, moving the stencil down, and I do it until that entire piece of cardstock is filled and it's making a nice cloud background. So I actually had one of my viewers request that I do a video on how to stencil the clouds, and this is how I would do it. And since I don't have an actual cloud stencil, I just made one using one of the cloud dies. Next, I'm going to take a scalloped rectangle and a regular rectangle die, and I'm going to layer the two into each other. So the solid rectangle is going in the middle, and then the scalloped is going on the outside. And I'm adding some washi tape to hold them in place. And when you die cut those, you get a frame that looks like a scalloped frame. So here I'm just measuring from one side of the die to the other. There's actually some lines that are in the die cut, and I'm just measuring where one line goes to the next line on those die cuts so that I know how big to cut or what size to cut down this cloud paper. And I ended up cutting it to 2.5 by 3 3/4, and that will enable it to fit nicely behind that frame. So now here I'm just laying everything out on my MISTI because I am going to use a stamp, and it just so happens that the stamp I'm using from the Sloths to Stamp set fits perfectly inside that frame. And I'm just positioning everything where I want it to go before I stamp it out. And once I have everything in place, I remove all the die cuts and then just ink that up with some chocolate ink. And then I just position everything where I want it to go then on this cloud piece of cardstock. I'm going to start out by gluing my branch, and it's going to hang off the edge, and that's okay because I will cut off the excess on the left. And then I'm going to apply glue to the back of the sloth and add him onto that cloud background. So I'm going to go ahead and add that entire layer with some liquid glue onto my leaf pattern paper, and that is cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then I'm going to add my frame, just glue that down, and then I'm going to be able to add my leaf puffy stickers. I think those go so perfectly. They match the pattern paper there in the background, and add some dimension as well. And then that entire layer will be added to a ginger snap card base measured A2 in size. And that completes this card. For this next card, I decided that I was going to make a card using the sketch for the weekly challenge in the Stamps of Life fan group on Facebook, and that is what this sketch looks like. So I saved it here on my iPad, and I just wanted to show you before I made the card what it looks like. So I'm using a tangerine piece of cardstock for my A2 size card base. The flower pattern paper is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. The tangerine strip is 1 3/4 by 3 3/4, and the powdered sugar one is 3 5/8 by 1 5/8. Then I had a tangerine square at 3 1/4 by 3 1/4, and then the Don't Worry Be Happy paper is 3 1/8 by 3 1/8. So here I'm just layering all of these pieces one on top of each other, just using some liquid glue. I'm also using a scallop circle and a stitched circle. So the scallop circle is going to be cut out of the tangerine cardstock, and the stitched circle is cut out of the powdered sugar. And I'm also using my branch, and this is actually the last set of die cuts for the sloth and the branch that I have in this paper pack for this card kit. So I'm using my very last one here. So I went ahead and adhered the branch down, cut off the excess, and then adding the sloth with foam adhesive so that he has some dimension and pops up. And then I'm going to go ahead and add all of these layers to my flower pattern paper. Just adding some liquid glue. And I'm just kind of positioning things where I want them to go, and I like using the liquid glue because if I need to move the cardstock layers around after I've already applied them, I still have some wiggle room and I can do that. And that little sloth is going to go down there in the bottom left hand corner, but before I add him, I am going to use some of the ginger snap ribbon, and I'm just going to add it along the bottom and adhere it on the back of that layer with some double-sided adhesive, and then put that entire layer with some liquid glue onto the tangerine card base. And then I'm going to take my sloth with the scallop, and that does have some double-sided adhesive foam on the back, and I just added that there to my card, and that completes this card. So if you take a look, you can kind of see how my design, it does resemble that Sweet Sunday sketch. So I just want to add that if you are ever looking for some layouts and you're kind of stuck, and if you don't know where to begin on a card layout, you can always do a search on Google on card sketches, and Sweet Sunday has a whole bunch that you can look at that will give you some ideas for card layouts. For this card, I'm using the Circle Flip It die set, and I'm using my bubblegum cardstock for the card base, and for the side pieces you can see I'm using the kiwis and the white pattern paper, and I think these colors look really pretty together, so that's why I picked them. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere those with some liquid glue to the sides. Remember, when you're doing your Flip It cards, the large panel is always on the back side, so it's always going to be on your right side, and the smaller panel will always be on the left, which is in the front. And those flowers, that's actually a die that was included with the Circle Flip It die set, and I die cut the flower die twice out of the bubblegum cardstock and ink blended the edges with candy ink. And there's also a button die that came with the Circle Flip It, which I die cut out of the powdered sugar, as well as that scallop die, which cut out of the powdered sugar as well. Those are all part of the Circle Flip It die set. So here I'm just adding these pieces onto my Flip It card, and that flower is going to go there in the middle, and I thought that these puffy stickers would look perfect, match the side panel there, and since they have sticky on the ends, I'm just adding them to some cardstock and cutting them out because I don't want all that sticky to be on the back side, because as you can see there, it's actually going to extend past that circle on the Flip It card. So that's why I put it on the cardstock and then just cut it out, and then just can add some liquid glue to the bottom and stick them underneath that flower. I really love this card. I think this is one of my favorites. And this is the Best Wishes die set, and I cut the background out of the kiwi, and I used the bubble gum for the Best Wishes words, and I'm just adding glue to the left part of that die because some of it's going to extend past the edge. And I am adding a scallop circle to the back side and a heart sticker to the front of that flower, and just adding some gingham ribbon to the side of the Flip It, and that is going to complete this card. So there we go. We have 12 cards that I made with the February kit. I never know how many I'm going to make, but I decided to go ahead and try for the 12. I can't guarantee that there's always going to be 12 cards though, but for this one there was. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Be sure to subscribe for more card making tutorials from me. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. Have a great day.